the famous narration that might seem to indicate that Dajjal is alive and healthy as we speak, and that he is chained up in some exotic island, maybe in the Bermuda Triangle. Allah knows best. I'm just making that up. What is this hadith and where do we get it from? This hadith is the famous hadith of Fatima binti Qais, one of the famous sahabiyat. She narrates, and this hadith is in Sahih Muslim, that one day we were sitting in our house when we heard the crier running through the city saying, "As-salatu jami'a, as-salatu jami'a." As-salatu jami'a is how the Prophet ﷺ would call the Sahaba to the masjid when there was an issue other than the 5 salawats. The adhan is not given. You have an announcement, come to the musalla, come to the musalla. That's how they would do that. As-salatu jami'a simply means come to the musalla. That's what it means now. Even though it technically means come and pray, but the meaning here is come to the masjid. So Fatima says, I rushed to the masjid to see what was happening, and I prayed with the Prophet ﷺ, and I was in the first line of the women, right behind the men. In her eagerness to hear what the Prophet ﷺ would say, she was in the first saf of the women behind the men. Point she's trying to say is, I heard directly everything that I'm about to tell you. So after we finished praying, the Prophet ﷺ went on the mimbar and sat down. And he said, let everybody remain where he is. Nobody move. Let everybody remain where he is. Do you know why I called you? They said, Allah and His Messenger know best. He said, I did not call you today to give you an advice or a lecture to cause you to cry or to fear Allah. That's not the reason. A maw'idah, no khatira today. I didn't call you. But rather, I came to tell you what Tamim ad-Dari came to inform me. Tamim ad-Dari. Who is Tamim ad-Dari? Tamim ad-Dari was one of the few Sahabi who was a Christian and then embraced Islam. The majority of Sahaba were pagans. Very, very few were Jewish or Christian when they embraced Islam. Very few. And of them is Tamim ad-Dari. So he's one of those group of Sahaba who was Ahli Kitab, and he embraces Islam, and of them is Tamim ad-Dari. And so Tamim ad-Dari came to me embracing Islam, and he told me a story that happened to him many, many years ago. Now, Tamim ad-Dari is from one of the tribes up north, and those tribes were seafaring tribes. They would ride the ocean. The Quraysh were a non-seafaring tribe. The Quraysh despised the ocean. The Quraysh did not like riding on the ocean. And that's why the Quran is full of references. فَإِذَا رَكِبُوا فِي الْفُلْكِ. The Quraysh did not like the ocean. And few of the Qurayshis rode on the ocean. And that's why when our Prophet ﷺ saw a dream when some of his own Sahaba were riding the oceans, conquering other lands, he laughed and he said, I saw my own ummah shall be riding on the waves like kings, riding horses and steeds, galloping, and they shall be conquering, oceans. And Milhan said, Ya Rasulullah, make dua that I am amongst them. And he said, you are amongst them. And that's why she died in Qubros, in Cyprus, because the Prophet said, you will be amongst them. So he laughed when he saw his ummah riding the ocean. It was a strange thing for the Quraysh. They did not like. Unlike Tamim ad-Dari, they were seafarers. They were people who were involved in navy issues. And so, naval issues, naval expeditions. And so, Tamim ad-Dari, he came to embrace Islam. And he came in the 9th year of the Hijrah. And he came to, in those days they sent the delegations to embrace Islam. And when he came, he told the Prophet ﷺ about something that happened to him many, many, many years ago. He said, Ya Rasulullah, let me tell you an interesting story. Let me tell you something that when I was an earlier young man, a Christian, this is what happened to me. So when he told this story, the Prophet ﷺ then called the Sahaba and said, here is Tamim ad-Dari, let me tell you what he told me. That's the hadith here, okay? Now, it's a very long hadith, and you will find it. Sahih Muslim, okay? This hadith is a long one. It's actually 4 or 5 pages of English. I'm not going to go into all of that. But in a nutshell, you've all heard of it somehow here and there. Most of you, I should say, have heard of it. And the story goes as follows, that Tamim ad-Dari says when he was a younger man, that he was in a ship of around 30 people from the tribe of Judham and Lukham. These are Christian Arab tribes up north, and he was from those tribes. And once a very severe storm came in the ocean, and for 30 days they were lost at sea. After there were 30 days, they were lost at sea. They had no clue where they were until they came to a faraway, ocean that they could not recognize, and they saw an island in the distance. So some of them, Tamim ad-Dari and a few of them, took the smaller boat to go get some water, to go get some food. So every large boat has that small boat to go in. So they took that smaller boat to go to that island. And when they landed on that island, they met a very terrifying animal, a beast that could speak to them, a dabba that could speak to them. The hadith did not describe him. It simply says a beast that's very hairy, just nothing but hair, and could speak. And Tamim saw this and his people, and they were terrified. And the beast said, "Come with me. I'm going to take you to my owner or my master." And they went to this island, and they went to this cave where they saw a man larger than any man they have ever seen. And the man was tied up in a more severe manner than any man they have ever seen. And the man then began to ask a number of questions. And it goes like, 10 questions or so. I'm not going to go into all of them. And they were so terrified, they just responded one after the other. And until in the end, the last question was, of the questions, the Tabariya Sea, is it still there? This well, is it giving water? This land, is it still cultivated? And they answered yes, yes, yes. And always the answer was, a time will come when there shall be no water in that lake. A time will come when this well will be dry. A time will come when this land that you consider to be very beautiful and green will be completely barren. So he's giving predictions in the future. Then he says that, has the Ummi Prophet been sent amongst the Arabs? Has that Prophet been sent amongst the Arabs? And Tamim ad-Dari at this time was a Christian, but he was an Arab. He knows the Prophet has come. So he says, yes, he has been sent. And he has come out from Mecca, and he has settled in Yathrib. Because he didn't call it Medina, because only Muslims called it Medina. For those 10 years when Islam was spreading, Yathrib and Medina were the same name, as you know, the same city. And the Muslims called it Medina, and the Munafiqun and the pagans called it the old name, Yathrib. And that is why we are not allowed as Muslims to call it Yathrib unless we describe it, that this is the pre-Islamic name. In any case, so, because the Prophet said they call it Yathrib and it is Medina. They call it Yathrib, it is, so we do not call it Yathrib as a name. In any case, so Tamim ad-Dari said he has settled in Medina. The Dajjal says, did the Arabs fight him? They say yes. So he says, who won? They say, sometimes he wins and sometimes the Arabs wins, meaning the Uhud. Uhud, they say, was a loss, even though Uhud was not a loss. From our perspective, Uhud was a stalemate. It was not a loss, but the Quraysh interpreted it as a loss. Dajjal then said, if there is good in the Arabs, they should follow him. And I will tell you about me. I am the Masih. And it is only a matter of time before I am let loose. And when I am let loose, I shall visit every single city on earth in 40 days, except for Mecca and Medina, for they are made haram for me. Every time I come to them, the angels will stop me. Then the Prophet ﷺ stopped his lecture, and he began poking on the mimbar, like this, to emphasize. And he said, this is Tiba, this is Tiba, this is Tiba. Did I not tell you about the Dajjal? And they said, yes, you did. Now this hadith ends over here. Now, this hadith is the famous hadith of Tamim ad-Dari, narrated by one Sahabiya, Fatima binti Qais. And it is in Sahih Muslim, and its chain appears to be authentic. Now, this hadith has caused a lot of controversy in the ummah. Why and how? Because it throws a spanner in what we seem to know about the Dajjal. Other traditions mention that the Dajjal will come towards the end of times. They mention he shall be born to parents who were childless for many, many years, and they're making dua for a child, and they shall be given a child, and they will not recognize that it is the Dajjal. The hadith that we just mentioned about Hafsa says that the Dajjal will come out and appear because of some anger issue. Something happened that made him angry. Whereas this hadith seems to throw all of that to the wind. And that Dajjal is alive and healthy, he's tied up, he knows he's the Dajjal, etc., etc. And because of this, this leads us to a very deep issue. Is it allowed for scholars, I'm not talking your average person, for scholars who understand, hadith scholars, to problematize a hadith because the content seems different? And the vast majority of scholars said no. And for good reason. Because if you open this door, then it will never be shut. If you open this door, then every Tom, Dick and Harry, wal jama'ah. So anyway, what was I saying? Is it allowed to problematize hadith based upon the content? The vast majority of scholars said no. A very small handful said yes, with a lot of conditions. And this is not the time to go into that. But one of those conditions, and I like this, one of those conditions is the problematization should not come from your mind or logic or rationality. It should come because it seems to be clashing with other ahadith. You understand this point, right? If the problem seems to come with a clash from within the tradition, that is different than when you say, oh, my mind doesn't understand the hadith. Because if you open this door, then out the window. As Ali radiallahu anhu said, that if the hadith or if the aql, or if the sharia were to be based on my aql, the masah over the socks should be done on the bottom. But I saw with my eyes the Prophet ﷺ do masah on the top. Memorize this, a very beautiful tradition, by the way, very beautiful tradition. If our religion were to be based on what I think, on my aql, on my common sense, then when you do masah, where should you do masah? On the bottom. But Ali radiallahu anhu said, I saw the Prophet ﷺ do masah on the top. When it comes to the deen, قال الله قال رسوله سمعنا وأطعنا, whether we understand or not. But what about if within the deen itself you have 2-3 hadith that seem to clash? In this case, it's not my mind. We have to now reconcile between this. So, based on this issue, we have some great ulama from the past and from the present. They did problematize this particular hadith. They did problematize this particular hadith. And of them, we have in our times as well, or I should say the generation before us, the famous scholar, the most famous alim of 100 years ago, and that is Sheikh Rashid Rida. Rashid Rida was one of those who said that this hadith doesn't make sense in light of all of these other hadith. And Rashid Rida is a great Sunni alim. He's not one of these, Now another great Sheikh as well in our times, my teacher, I studied with him, Sheikh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymeen, very mainstream, very traditional, very hardcore Sheikh who loved hadith. But he said, this hadith, I don't consider it authentic, even if it is in Sahih Muslim. Why? Because it seems to conflict with other ahadith. So in reality, I have to be honest, I am sympathetic to this minority voice. Because it doesn't make sense that the Dajjal is alive and healthy. And it also doesn't make sense that if this incident occurred, only Fatima bint Qais narrates it and the Prophet has called the entire city. Something doesn't seem to be right, and Allah knows best. Our Shaykh would say, my heart is at unease with regards to the authenticity of this hadith. This is what Ibn Uthaymeen would say. فِي الْقَلْبِ مِنْهُ شَيْءٍ. My heart is not comfortable. Something doesn't make sense to me. I can't pinpoint it, but it's not adding up to me. The content, the Islam, everything, it's just not adding up. And mashallah, our Shaykh was a very humble man. He would say, but if the Prophet ﷺ said it, then I believe in it. And this is exactly what I say. The hadith doesn't seem to make sense. But if he said it, amantu billahi wa rasuli. Simple as that. So, we put this hadith of, which hadith guys? Tamim ad-Dari. In a footnote. And we have a question mark. And we leave it at that. Allah knows best. I don't know. But mainstream interpretation, Imam al-Nawawi, Ibn Kathir, these scholars, they considered this to be authentic because this is Sahih Muslim. Then the issue comes, how do you reconcile this with the other ahadith about the coming of Dajjal, shall be born at a later time, his parents shall be childless, etc., etc. And you have one of two opinions. The first of them is that time and space mean nothing to Allah, and so Tamim ad-Dari got lost in, let me speak in the language of Star Trek, and I'm a big fan of Star Trek when I was a child. They got lost in a different time warp. And so they traveled to a different time and place, and Allah is ala kulli shayin qadir. And they saw an image of Dajjal projected from the future back to their time frame. And Allah ala kulli shayin qadir. Okay, fair enough. And the other interpretation is that Dajjal is in fact alive and healthy, and that he was born, and all of this happened in the past, and then he is being chained and kept, as the hadith of Tamim says, and he shall be released in the future. Now the issue comes, the only hadith that mentions alive and healthy and chains is this one hadith of Tamim ad-Dari. That's it. Every other hadith gives a different narrative. So you have two different narratives. Can we reconcile the two? Most scholars try to do that, but it's a very difficult fit. And that's why Shaykh Rashid Rida and Ibn Uthaymin and others, they basically said, look, this one, you have a big beautiful puzzle, right? You have one piece, is just not fitting in. And the puzzle seems complete. And yet you have in the box this piece. So you can say, maybe the manufacturers put this by accident. I'm being analogous here, right? Maybe this piece shouldn't have been in the box. It's just a mistake by one of the narrators. That's what they're saying. And the picture is complete. And the other scholars say, no, it's in the box. The manufacturer sent it, so I'm going to squeeze it in. There's a little space here, let me just put it in and shove it there, and khalas, we have a painting. Which version do you want to follow? I leave it to you. But my sympathies are clear. And I leave it to you whichever one you want to do.